about the most important microbiomes of all, in fact, if we think about the starting point and where we begin, is the infant microbiome. And from the very start of life, beneficial bacteria play a key role in shaping a baby's immune system, digestion, and even emotional well-being. So Jules, a nutritional therapist with over 26 years of experience helping clients find better health and lecturing to students and healthcare practitioners, has a fascination with the microbiome and how it begins, and when researching the link between gut health and childhood allergies, a passion that now drives both her clinical work and educational programs. In her talk, The Infant Microbiome, Building Health from Inside Out, Jules is going to explore how birth method, feeding choices, antibiotics, and modern hygiene practices influence a baby's inner ecosystem. Whether you're a parent, you're expecting a baby, or simply curious about early life health, this session will offer fresh insights into building lifelong well-being from the very beginning. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jules.
Nutritional therapist for 26 years now, and much of that time has been working with mums and babies and children, and seeing those children grow into great, robust adults in sort of teenage and adult years has been lovely. What I wanted to do today was really share with you some of my learnings and insights on the infant microbiome, because I absolutely believe it's one of the most important drivers, not only for an infant's health, but for that infant to grow into a healthy adult as well. So if we can get it right from day zero, it makes the rest of life so much more easy. So let's kick off. Okay, not a problem. Oops, don't do that. Right, okay, lovely little photo of a beautiful baby there. And I think, you know, for most people, it invokes real sort of nurturing feeling. We want to keep that newborn baby safe, don't we? We want to protect it from harm. And part of the things that we're actually protecting newborns from probably includes bacteria, because we think about infection, we think about illness, don't we, disease. So it's natural, I guess, to make sure everything's scrupulously clean. But we maybe as a mother want to kind of clean our skin, and we want to clean the kitchen environment, and we want to clean the nursery. But what I'm going to show you today is that some of the things that we might be cleaning away are actually foundational to that baby's health and can really make a difference as to how their immune system develops and matures, how their digestion develops and matures, even how their brain and their nervous system develops. When I first started getting interested in this area, it was actually for my dissertation, which was in the 90s. I'm showing my age now. And I read some research that was looking at the difference between an infant microbiome in a baby that was born naturally, a vaginal birth, and a baby that was born by C-section. And the research, very early days of microbiome research, it showed that the babies had very different gut flora. So when they tested the poo samples, they found that the babies that were born naturally had a very different sort of combination of bugs in their poo to those born by C-section. But what was fascinating was that research then carried on observing those babies as they grew up. And they checked in with them at age 4, and they checked in with them at age 7. And they found that the babies that had the C-section, more adult-like gut flora, were much more prone to allergies. And one of the things I'd really like to emphasise today is that we have the possibility of actually reducing an allergic risk in a baby just by modulating their infant microbiome. So if any of you know anybody that's pregnant, anybody that's had a little baby, I've got some products that you can take away at the end, because there really are solutions out there that can reduce allergic potential. So the first thing we really need to think about, you know, hopefully you've walked through the gut, you know a little bit about the microbiome already. Where do those bugs actually come from in the first place? We know that we're carrying almost as much bacteria in our bodies as we've got human cells. So you could say that we're actually half bacteria, half human. Yeah? when you actually look at the bacterial DNA, it becomes even more mind-blowing, because there's 100 times more bacterial DNA than we've got human DNA. It's crazy to think about, isn't it? But where did they all come from? Because when we were in our mother's womb, it was a kind of sterile environment. You know, we were protected from any bacteria in the outside. So where did all those bacteria come from? Does anybody know? Any ideas?
From the environment.
Yeah, okay, from the environment, particularly the mother. We know that 70% of the bacteria that an infant picks up in the first few days of life will stay with them and almost seed and mould their adult microbiome. So those first early days are so important. And what I'd like to share with you is some of the more direct ways that those bacteria are actually transferred into the infant's gut. About 60% come from the mother, but that varies quite a lot because they come from different microbiomes within the mother. And if you're in the last lecture, Nitu, you touched upon that there's a skin microbiome, there's a vaginal microbiome, as well as the gut microbiome. And it's really fascinating how bacteria from all of those microbiomes in the mother manage to get transferred to her baby. And what's even more fascinating is that in pregnancy, the mother's microbiomes shift, all of them. The skin one, the vaginal one, the gut one. So we get very particular, very specific bacteria upregulating prior to the birth. And in particular, in the vagina, we have the lactobacilli bacteria dominating. And we'll see later they're so important for infant health. So this slide's a bit busy, but it's really just showing you on the diagram that we know bacteria from the mother's oral microbiome, from her mouth, from her skin, from her vagina, and even from her gut, are actually then found in the microbiome of the infant. We also know that the local environment is very important. And going back to that early research that I was so fascinated by, the caesarean-born children had bacteria from the hospital environment. And hospitals are sterile, aren't they? So they use a lot of sort of sterilising products. They keep everything scrupulously clean. But there are always going to be bacteria there. You know, bacteria are on every single surface of our world. Yeah. So the bacteria that are present in the hospital environment are very different to those that will be present in, if it was a home birth, for instance, or if we're talking about a mother giving birth in a rural setting. The bacteria will be very different to those in the hospital environment. One of the other ways that is absolutely fascinating that we can actually get the bacteria into the infant is via the breast. Now, I still get goosebumps down my spine whenever I think about this because it's just so incredible how it actually happens. There's something called the entero-mammary pathway. So entero means something to do with the gut, mammary to do with the breast. And it's basically a term given for a mechanism that takes place where the mother's immune cells select the best bacteria from her gut and actually move those bacteria via the lymphatic system up to the breast. So those bacteria from her gut are then expressed into the breast milk. So that newborn baby is actually having almost like an inoculation from the mother via her natural breast milk, which reflects the mother's gut flora and the mother's environment. It's one reason why I'm really passionate about helping mothers prepare for the birth, because if they can get their gut flora right, then that actually helps pass on the absolute best bugs to the newborn as well. Of course you can.
So are you saying that a woman who has a caesarean, and doesn't breastfeed is putting her child at a huge disadvantage vis-a-vis the microbiome?
There will be differences in the microbiome. It can catch up, for sure, But in my opinion, if we can make some changes, and I'm going to suggest what we can do to improve the microbiome, why not get it the best it can from day one? So I'm going to show you some techniques for if a woman knew that she was going to have a cesarean section, there's things that she could do that would help support the infant's microbiome. Similarly with the breast milk as well. If she's having formula, there's things that we can do to the formula that help make it a better microbiome for the infant.
This is all about education.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's simple interventions. It's nothing too arduous. So we're going to be talking about what you can actually do in the birthing process, and we're going to be talking about how you can actually use a probiotic to replicate what would be in the breast milk. But please do ask some more questions as well, because that was fascinating. The other thing that is really amazing about breast milk, not only is it providing these nutritional components that the baby needs in the best forms possible, it also contains these things called human milk oligosaccharides. I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But have you heard the term prebiotic? Prebiotic. Okay, so what's a prebiotic? Maybe tell me. Do you know? It's the food, isn't it, for the gut bacteria? Yeah, so we have the probiotics, which is actually the bacteria themselves, and then we have the prebiotics, which is like the lunch pack to go down and feed the beneficial bacteria. And what we found is that in human milk, so in breast milk, it's teeming with a lunchbox, a ready-made lunchbox, so that the bacteria have their starting food to help them cultivate and flourish within the newborn sterile gut. There's about 162 different human milk oligosaccharides that have been identified, and they're all again unique to that mother. So it brings us back to the point again that if we can get the mother's diet and her microbiome as good as it can be, even before she gets pregnant ideally, but if not, certainly working through pregnancy, we can use things, certain foods, certain prebiotics, even probiotic supplements to help improve her microbiome. Then it's going to then pass on the beneficial bugs both through skin-to-skin contact, birth canal contact, and also through the breast milk, so that the infant then has the best sort of starting point to grow their own microbiome to take them through life. I wanted to talk about weaning as well, because weaning is a really key point in the development of an infant. So from day 0, where they've been expelled from the warm, safety, well-fed comfort of the mother's womb, they need to start fending for themselves a little bit more. They're breathing in oxygen, they're taking in nourishment via the breast milk. So they're starting to mature, their immune system's starting to develop, their digestion's starting to develop. And then suddenly they're faced with the challenge of actually getting solid food into their guts. Just think what a challenge that is. You've had milk, and that's the only thing you've had for the first 6 months of life. And then suddenly you're being confronted with carrot puree, or apple, or rice, or whatever it might be, which are very, very foreign to that baby's immune system. But the research shows that when we have the right bugs in the infant gut, it's almost like they carry the food across the gut wall, not literally, but the presence of those bacteria means that the food is more easily tolerated. And the way that I like to think things through very simply, make things as simple as I can from my head. The way I kind of explain it to myself is, if you think of the immune system as a lifeguard, a bit random, but bear with me. So you've got the lifeguard sat up on his tower overlooking a swimming pool, okay? That's your immune system. If that lifeguard is on his mobile phone, or reading a book or whatever, he's not going to notice if there's a child getting into trouble in the pool, is there? Yeah? He's not going to dive in, he's not going to stop a disaster unfolding. Okay. That's a little bit like your immune system sort of sitting back and not paying enough notice and letting infections come into the body. Conversely, if we've got a lifeguard up on a tower and they're overly zealous, and every time a child shouts or jumps in or splashes, they're diving into the swimming pool. What's going to happen then? The immune system's going to overreact, and we're going to have things like allergies, which are maybe reactions to things like dust mites or pollen or food. Or we might even have like an autoimmune condition developing where the body's actually attacking its own cells. The immune system's too reactive. So we want the sweet spot, don't we? We want balance in the immune system. We want that immune system to be ready to act, but only to act when it's needed. And for me, that's what the microbiome does. Because those bacteria are not human cells. They are foreign bodies within us, yeah? So it's almost like they're poking the lifeguard. They're saying, oh look, we're here by the way, don't forget, we're here. Wake up, get off your phone, pay attention to what's going on. And in sort of a scientific term, we call that sort of immune modulation, yeah? Immune tolerance. And that's one of the main ways in which the microbiome can help us to tolerate food and learn about the environment and not react inappropriately. And at the end, I'm going to tell you about how we can use probiotic supplements to actually support that balancing of the immune system and reduce allergy risk. So in terms of just for any of you that are working with children, just a little bit more detail about weaning. So this is when we bring the solid food into the diet alongside milk, whether it's breast or formula. And the research has been all over the place over the last 20 years. And as a doula, you've no doubt seen this as well. The current thinking is that we don't want to wean too early. And too early would be before five months, ideally 6 months. But we don't want to wean too late either. So in other words, we've got this window between sort of 6 and 12 months when the immune system is learning about the environment. It's starting to understand what in the environment is safe and what needs to be reacted to, where the immune system needs to kick in and respond. So weaning, it's in this window of kind of critical window between 6 or 12 months, but to help it establish itself, I guess, in the most effective way is actually having a healthy microbiome. And one of the things that I recommend to my mothers is if they can carry on breastfeeding over that window of weaning, so over 6 months to 12 months, that's the absolute ideal. But again, coming back to the lady at the back that mentioned about not being able to breastfeed, then again, we could use a supplement. We could use a probiotic supplement to sort of provide what's actually given with the breast milk. So there's options out there. So I also mentioned that I talk about how we can make steps to ensure that the infant microbiome is as good as it possibly can be. And the first thing to talk about is something called vaginal seeding. Now this is where we're taking bacteria, mostly lactobacilli, from the mother's vagina, and they form the basis, the root, the core of the new microbiome. Now if it's a natural birth, the baby's actually going to travel through the vagina and they're naturally going to pick up these lactobacilli. Remember I said earlier that in pregnancy the bacteria in the mother change, so the levels of lactobacilli in her vagina actually increase. It's like she knew what she was doing. So that's the natural way of doing it. If there's a mother going in for a C-section, there is a technique referred to as vaginal seeding, which involves taking either a sterile swab or a sterile piece of fabric, muslin fabric, and inserting it into the vagina as close as possible to when the C-section is going to take place, but making sure that it's before they administer antibiotics, because you don't want to get the bugs all wiped out. And that swab or muslin, when the baby is born, it's then wiped across the face, it's wiped on the skin, it's wiped across the mouth, as a way of simulating what would happen in a natural birth, so that they get the lactobacilli bacteria. Now there's, again, like weaning, there's been the for camp, the against camp. It's a bit of a debate been going on over the last 15 years or so. But there's some research came out in April this year which showed that this technique does help to increase the microflora in the infant after a C-section. It also has shown benefits in terms of the neurodevelopment of that infant, and also some metabolic benefits as well. So there is research out there if you want to go and have a look and see what the latest thinking is, but definitely something to consider. Pre and probiotics I've touched upon, and I'll talk to you about the product that I brought with me a little bit later, but those can be used, they can be used by a breastfeeding mum, they can be used by a baby that's been born naturally, but I would definitely recommend them if it has been a caesarean birth, if the baby's formula fed, and if there's any antibiotics in the early stages of life, because it will just help get those, particularly the lactobacilli and the bifidobacteria, will help get the levels back up really quickly. Breastfeeding, mentioned the benefits of that. If you can't breastfeed, then you can actually add the probiotics to the formula milk. So it's just literally putting a tiny few grains, quarter of a teaspoon into each feed. Weaning, we looked at avoiding weaning too early or too late. And as Nitya was talking about, colourful foods, rainbow foods, starting to introduce fruit and vegetables as early as weaning. So starting to get the child used to the textures, the smells, the flavours, the colours of fruits and vegetables. And I've done quite a lot of work in school, and I'd like to think that that would be the norm, but it's absolutely not. I've had children say to me that they've never tried a piece of cucumber before, they've never had a strawberry. Why do you think we want those fruit and vegetables to be in from such an early age? What would be the benefit in terms of the infant microbiome? Anybody know? Fibre, yeah, absolutely. They also contain something called polyphenols, which are plant chemicals, which are known to be really supportive of the microbiome. So it's a real win-win. And outdoor play. No, I'm really fortunate. I live in the countryside, and my son, when he was a toddler, we used to go into the woods and we'd get some mud and we'd slap it onto the tree trunk and we'd make faces on the tree trunk. We'd stick in acorns and bits of twigs, and it was his favourite thing to do. So being out in nature, playing, if you live in the countryside, finding a park or a green area that you can go to regularly. If you haven't got a garden, planting some herbs on a window ledge. That interaction with the soil is so beneficial, and the research on contact with nature is so conclusive. The children that grow up in a more farm or rural environment have a much lower allergy risk. So if you're living in London, you think, okay, I'm not in a farm, I'm not in a rural environment. But think about other ways that you can mimic that exposure. One way might be to get a pet. The contact with a furred animal can really help, as can siblings actually. So brothers, sisters and furred animals. Also not over-sanitising, so not cleaning everything to death. Yes, we want to have a hygienic environment, but not spraying everything with sort of detergents and antimicrobial sprays all the time. So, in summary, we have looked at how and why the infant microbiome is so important. I just wanted to run through a few of those points to really spell it out in detail, because as I said at the start, 26 years of practice with mothers and children, this is like the one fundamental thing. If you can get it right from day zero, it gives you such an advantage moving forward. The first thing we looked at was training the immune system. So you remember I said about the lifeguard analogy, yeah? So the friendly bacteria are kind of prodding the immune system, keeping it alert so that it knows how to respond and when to respond. And the impact of that is not only is that child going to fight off colds and flu and any sort of infections that are going on at school, they're also going to have a reduced risk of allergies and potentially also autoimmune conditions. The healthy bacteria also help your digestion, and we know this from the adult microbiome, don't we? But one thing that's quite specific to the newborn is the bacteria help them digest the milk, whether that's formula milk or whether it's breast milk. So if you've got a baby that has a compromised microbiome, they're more likely to get a condition called colic. And colic is when they're not able to tolerate and digest as well as they should be. We also know that the microbiome helps with the nervous system and brain development. And those of you that were here earlier heard Nissi talk about the gut-brain connection. Yeah? So we have seen some research linking neurodiverse conditions, things like autism and ADHD, to a compromised microbiome and antibiotics in early life. So in terms of making sure that we've got the best chance of nervous system development for that baby, working on the microbiome is really key. If that's not enough, we also see benefits in terms of health and metabolism, so maintaining a healthy body weight as we move through life. So all in all, this is the reason why I think, if we can look after the infant microbiome, it really is building foundations from inside out. So I would like now to ask, has anybody got any contacts or any families or anybody that you know that's pregnant or is expecting a baby or has a young baby? I know you do, don't you?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any connections? Yeah, a few? Okay, right. Let me just tell you about this product because it's from a company called BioCare. I'm not employed by BioCare, but I do some of their education programs. So I do some webinars and some lecturing for them. The reason why I wanted to tell you about it is it's such a simple intervention. This one pot could make the difference between whether a child develops an allergy or not. Okay. And the research that was carried out was in Wales. It was in a town called Swansea. And they took 454 mother and baby groups. So it's actually pregnant women that they took initially. And they gave half of the group a probiotic for the mother in her third trimester. And they gave half the group what we call a placebo, which is a capsule that hasn't got the active ingredient in there. Yeah? The mothers that had the probiotic then had this pot that they gave to their baby for the first 6 months of life. And this is a powder. It's a probiotic, but it's also got prebiotic in there, which is, remember, there's the food for the healthy bacteria. And it's got a specific prebiotic called galacto-oligosaccharides, which is the one found in breast milk. So it's trying to replicate what would be in that mother's breast milk. So they did this trial, so half of the mums had the probiotic, half of them didn't, half of the babies had the probiotic, half of them didn't. The mother and baby group that had the probiotic, the risk of asthma was 57% reduced, and the risk of reactions to milk and egg and dust and pet dander was 44% reduced. So literally 2 pots of probiotics have made a massive difference on the immune system of that baby. So as you said, it's education. If we can get that message out there, 2 pots of product can make such a difference to the immune system. Yeah.
So, having worked in the system, how much of this is actually made available to pregnant mothers to the NHS? Is there anything out there, or is it still considered?
In some respects, I would say it's not mainstream. I've used the forerunner to this product with Great Ormond Street on the premature babies. So babies that were born, weeks, months before their due date, and they've used probiotics for the last 40 years. So in some hospitals it's recognised. I just think the message gets drowned out a little bit by all the big companies selling their wares, if that makes sense.
This is an area to focus on in terms of education. I mean, I have a next door neighbour who's got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And that 3-year-old, since it was born, has never stopped being ill. Now, it's a robust little boy, and there's no reason for it. Parents explain it as, oh well, they go to nursery 2 days a week, so they catch everything in nursery.
Yeah.
But something's wrong.
Yeah.
You don't, plus he has eczema.
All the signs.
So how can I help them?
You could still use probiotics with them at an older age. It wouldn't be this one. It would be one designed for children.
I need to talk to you later.
Absolutely, and then also diet as well. So all the fruit and vegetables and fermented foods, things like kefir could be really useful as well because they've got the live bacteria in them.
But you know, the reality of life is
I know.
that parents have to work, children go to bakery, nursery, whatever, come home in the evening, they're tired, and I've seen it happen.
I know.
Endless fish fingers, spaghetti hoops, and there's no variety, and yet they pride themselves as adults to eat well. And they're not eating well, they're not eating because they don't have the time.
No.
You know,
Absolutely.
and I think, I just sort of despair sometimes because I think so people to the beginning
Yeah.
and also the child resists. They give in. It's easy to give
If it's not going to be on the plate, it's not going to be eaten, is it? Yeah.
And so it's, I would like to see a lot more out there. I do some children in the country and I'm fascinated by your talk. And it makes me think, how can we as an organisation try and put something more out there? Because that is the important time.
Absolutely.
0 to 5, really.
Absolutely. And what you were saying about mothers going back to work, most of them are going back to work before the baby's sort of 6 months. And remember what I said about the weaning?
Yeah.
And breastfeeding is so important there. And that's...
And they elect to have cesareans. They choose not to breastfeed.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, you can't tell people you have to do something because we're a free society. They only believe what they're depriving their children of. I mean, my next door neighbour chose not to breastfeed, and when I asked her why, she said because she finds it horrible.
I've spoken to groups of teenage girls and they've said they find it unnatural.
Unnatural, and it might spoil their breasts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
It's difficult. The way I love looking at what the body's doing and the fact that our microbiome is shifting prior to birth and that, you know, we're getting more lactobacilli increase. You know, I find that absolutely fascinating. So our bodies know what's needed and what's the best to provide to our infants, but then we're kind of like denying it at many stages by opting for formula feed. The other thing that I would say is that, you know, the formula feeds have improved over the years and they're very much on this research. So they're now including things like prebiotics in their formulas. So you'll quite often see that they'll advertise GOS, for instance, the galacto-oligosaccharides. But a formula feed, much as it might be, you know, nutritionally robust, is never going to replicate what's in the mother's milk.
It's better than nothing.
Oh, absolutely. But you could then improve it more by actually adding probiotics in as well.
I think we need to ask Catherine with a new course, new education.
What's your idea around, because some moms who maybe cannot breastfeed,
Yeah.
but they get breast milk from a donation?
Yeah.
What's your knowledge around that?
So I think certainly if it's like a premature or it's a compromised baby, I think it's a good option if that's open to you. because there's many other things that I haven't had a chance to talk about today that are in breast milk that can't possibly be replicated in formula. That said, it won't represent the mother's environment. That's what you're missing out. So it's a good halfway house between formula and the mother's milk. In the first few days, well, the first day really of breast milk is something called colostrum, which is it's not really the milk as such. It's actually a really concentrated package of immune cells. So we actually get 4 grams of something called secretory IgA in the first day of milk. Now that's like almost like an inoculation to that baby. Because imagine immunoglobulin, you do biochemistry, they don't weigh much, do they? So 4 grams is a lot of immune power, isn't it? And that's really providing your baby with immune defences while the microbiome develops, while the immune system develops. It's helping them transition into the environment safely without getting ill. So there's lots of other benefits of breast milk as well as those that I've talked about today. Any other questions? Anybody else? Yes?
I know you mentioned these are safe for prem babies as well.
They are.
Yeah. Is there any duration or limitation? How much can they
I would definitely go for the first 6 months because I think that's going to give you a good starting point. And then if there was any dip in immunity, if there was any exposure to antibiotics, I'd definitely go in again with a probiotic. Generally speaking, there's no kind of risk of overdosing with a probiotic. It tends to be looking at your budget and thinking, how do I use it most affordably and most appropriately? But yes. Any other questions? Anybody else? Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Jules.